They are perched on park benches, scurrying down streets. They're even taking the subway. We're talking about the many, many rats living across the Big Apple.
Imagine bioengineered carnivores searching for rats in alleyways and subway tunnels. Is this the last resort for controlling pests in one of America's most famous cities? Were millions of rat killers released by New York? We'll address that today, as well as how the city's battle against rats has subtly changed, while also drawing lessons from the past. Let's dive straight in. The scope and background of the rat problem in New York. The fight against the brown rat, Rattus norvegicus, in New York City has been going on for over 200 years. Often referred to as the Norway rat, the brown rat is not indigenous to North America. On a European commerce ship, it came in the 1700s. Ships arriving in the colonial docks of Lower Manhattan, perhaps loaded with cargo and grain barrels. Rats had already established a home in the expanding maze of tenement basements, slaughterhouses, and docks that bordered the East River and Lower Hudson by the early 19th century, when New York's population had risen to over 200,000. By 1850, the city's underground world of sewers, cellars, and trash piles offered an unbroken environment for rodents, as city engineer George Waring Jr. subsequently detailed in his sanitation reports. The issue was made worse by the late 19th century sewer system expansion. By the 1880s, the first broad, brick-lined sewers, intended to manage garbage and stormwater, had turned into a vast rat haven that connected almost every block of Lower Manhattan. Reformers in the field of sanitation, such as Colonel Waring, who oversaw the Department of Street Cleaning in the 1890s, realized that the rat population was nourished just as efficiently by the city's antiquated waste disposal system, which was plagued by open trash piles and unsealed ash barrels as it was by disease. They made an effort to fight the good battle, but didn't succeed. The city could not suffocate the rat population as rapidly as it expanded, even with revolutionary changes like the installation of horse-drawn street sweepers and uniformed white wings sanitation workers. Rats were an integral component of the ecology of New York as the 20th century dawned, with the city's population surpassing 3 million due to immigration and industry. The issue reached public health levels by the 1940s, necessitating a thorough investigation. The New York City Department of Health started charting infestations in each borough and linking them to food distribution locations, uncollected waste, and housing deterioration. Under President Truman's Health for All program, the first formal rat control campaigns were started in 1949 with funding from the federal government for urban reconstruction. However, as the city's Bureau of Pest Control later reported, these initiatives were only partially successful because the fundamental problem, garbage management, remained unabated. Rats were kept alive in communities by the city's daily production of thousands of tons of organic waste, and the practice of leaving open metal trash cans on sidewalks for hours before they were collected. From Harlem to the Lower East Side, new high-rise buildings were built during the post-war boom, but it also created new breeding grounds for pests. In the 1950s and 1960s, the New York City Housing Authority constructed public housing complexes that offered rats, refuge, heat, and a complicated network of amenities. Reports produced in the 1960s by the Rat Indexing Unit of the Health Department revealed that over 30% of basements examined in certain low-income housing areas had active burrows or droppings. The problem was made worse by funding cuts to pest control and sanitation during the city's financial crisis in the 1970s, which left entire areas without regular garbage pickup. Rats, which were portrayed as emblems of urban neglect in movies, local media, and the tabloid press, contributed to the city's reputation as being associated with urban roughness by the early 1980s. Rats continued to be a tenacious underclass of New York life even after the city's population had recovered and tourism and real estate were flourishing by the early 21st century. Residents' long-held knowledge was eventually quantified through data analysis. In 2014, Jonathan Auerbach, a statistician at Columbia University, estimated that there were about 2 million rats in New York, or about 25% of the human population, based on a combination of housing density, sanitation records, and 311 complaint data. His research, which was disseminated by the American Statistical Association, changed the city's perspective on the issue by highlighting the hyper-localized nature of infestations, showing that most rat sightings occurred in specific blocks rather than entire boroughs. The data revealed particularly high densities in Brooklyn's Bedford-Stuyvesant, Upper Manhattan, and portions of the Bronx, where dense housing, aged structures, and trash storage provided perfect breeding grounds. The city's worsening rodent trend was confirmed by official 311 hotline reports of over 26,000 rat sightings by 2022, a 60% rise from 2019. The increase was linked by public health experts to changes in food and waste habits during the COVID-19 epidemic. Rats were forced to go to residential areas where domestic trash became their main source of food waste when lockdowns closed restaurants and workplaces, denying them access to commercial food waste. In May 2020, a nationwide notice was sent by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, alerting people of unusual or aggressive rodent behavior associated with disruptions in food sources. The city's health department also reported an increase in leptospirosis infections at the same time, a bacterial infection spread by rat urine. New York registered 49 verified cases between 2021 and 2023, with 24 of those instances occurring in 2023 alone, the most ever. Geographically, these outbreaks were associated with high frequencies of rat sightings in Upper Manhattan and the Bronx. From a historical standpoint, every stage of New York's growth has unintentionally fostered the rat population it aims to manage. An ongoing ecological thread may be seen in the introduction of steamships and open sewers in the 18th century, the growth of tenement living, the mid-century drop in sanitation budgets, and even the increase in food delivery waste in the 1920s. According to the Department of Sanitation, the city generates over 12,000 tons of residential garbage per day, a large portion of which is organic waste that is accessible to rodents prior to collection. Large colonies can be maintained by even little deviations from this collecting schedule. Rats are thought to be present in almost every neighborhood below 125th Street in Manhattan, as well as in significant transit-adjacent areas in the outer boroughs, according to current estimates. Rat infestations were found in 37% of subway stations during the MTA's 2021 audit, which led to the physical redesign of trash cans and tracks, as well as pest control contracts. Rat DNA from all throughout the city was analyzed in a 2017 genetic study by Fordham University, which identified separate uptown and downtown rat populations. Thus, the rat problem in New York is not an exception. It is an ecological representation of garbage and urban density. However, how does the city intend to handle it? The Great Rat Invasion and New York's War Plan. The year 2023 marked a watershed in New York City's centuries-long fight against rats. Mayor Eric Adams reorganized the city's rodent management program in response to growing annoyance over infestations, an increase in 311 complaints, and escalating public health concerns. Adams declared the establishment of the Office of Rodent Mitigation on April 12, 2023, a centralized command intended to bring together a long-separated system. He put Kathleen Corradi, an expert in urban ecology and pest control, in charge of it. She was soon labeled the Rat Czar by the media and became the city's first director of rodent mitigation. Her appointment was the first time in New York's history that all rodent control-related tasks were coordinated by a single authority. Several entities were in charge of managing rats in New York prior to Corradi's appointment. The Department of Sanitation was in charge of garbage collection. The Department of Health and Mental Hygiene was in charge of health inspections. The Department of Housing Preservation and Development kept an eye out for building infractions. while the Department of Parks and Recreation looked after green areas. Because each organization operated independently, there were data gaps and bureaucratic overlaps that prevented significant advancement. Under the new office, Karate's staff combined cross-agency data on housing problems, complaints, and sanitation, and all operations were coordinated through the Mayor's Office of Citywide Operations. The city made its first attempt to manage rodent eradication as a coherent biological system rather than as dispersed nuisance abatement with this digital unification, which was aided by public dashboards and predictive mapping. Launched in late 2022 and expanded under Karate's leadership in 2023, Get Stuff Clean was a significant effort under the unified framework. Through 311 data, the program identified neighborhoods with persistent infestations and more than 1,000 high-priority rat mitigation zones throughout the 5 boroughs. Sanitation records and health reports. The worst-hit neighborhoods included Harlem, Chinatown, Bushwick, Inwood, and the Grand Concourse in the Bronx, where crowded housing and dilapidated infrastructure made for perfect breeding grounds. Within 6 months, crews quadrupled waste pickups, stepped up street cleaning, and cleared more than 1,500 tons of rubbish. For the first time, city housing and sanitation teams collaborated to combine building code enforcement with environmental cleanup. The trash containerization program, a long-delayed waste management reform, was also brought back to life by the Adams administration. It mandated that all buildings store their trash in rat-resistant sealed bins rather than in plastic bags stacked curbside. Due to financial and spatial limitations, this change has been suggested for decades but has been opposed. All residential properties with up to 9 units were required to utilize rigid, lidded containers beginning in July 2023. Larger buildings and commercial establishments were required to follow in early 2024. The goal of the approach was straightforward, yet revolutionary. To reduce rat numbers, food availability was to be cut off. The modification was dubbed the single most important modernization of New York's waste system in a century by Sanitation Commissioner Jessica Tisch. An unexpectedly important aspect that complemented containerization was a change to the city's waste set-out hours. In the past, garbage could be dumped outside as early as 4 p.m., letting rats eat all night long. New rules postponed the set-out until 8 p.m. in April 2023 for buildings at 6 p.m. with bags. For people who use containers, this resulted in an almost 70% reduction in the evening feeding window. Data from DSNY's trial projects, such as Fordham and Hell's Kitchen, revealed a 68% decrease in observable rat activity in just 3 months. The seemingly insignificant timing adjustment turned out to be one of the new rodent strategy's most useful elements. Additionally, the reforms had financial teeth. Unsanitary waste disposal and neglecting to address pests can result in fines of $300 to $2,000 under the Modified Housing Maintenance Code. Over 150,000 preventive inspections were carried out by the Department of Health in 2023, a 20% increase over pre-pandemic levels. However, education was combined with enforcement. The city grew its Rat Academy programs to teach tenants, superintendents, and landlords structural, sealing, and waste-proofing methods. These free initiatives, which were frequently hosted in public libraries and community centers, were a part of a larger movement away from strictly punitive enforcement and toward civic engagement. The campaign's public face was Mayor Adams himself. "Rats don't run this city," he said again. Residents were urged to embrace garbage management as a shared urban task by means of social media films, subway advertisements, and posters that highlighted civic pride and responsibility. Research revealed that neighborhoods with regular municipal service experienced up to 40% fewer infestations when they took part in community-led cleanups. Improvements to the Rat Information Portal, or RIP, provided the technological foundation for the city's rodent control efforts. accessible web map that displays active mitigation efforts, violations, and inspections. REP was first introduced in 2010 and was revamped in 2023 to offer block-level data by combining housing and sanitation records with 311 reports. While agencies utilized the same data to prioritize actions, residents could now see whether their block had ongoing cleanups or recent violations. The creation of rat mitigation zones, or RMZs, which are intensive focus regions intended to test advanced pest control technologies and focused cleanups, produced the most noticeable results. The first RMZs were established in Lower Manhattan, Bedford-Stuyvesant, East Harlem, and the Grand Concourse in the Bronx. Frequent rubbish pickup, house inspections, and extermination operations utilizing cutting-edge non-toxic technology were all combined in these zones. Among these were dry ice sealing, a compassionate technique that fills burrows with carbon dioxide gas, and carbon monoxide burrow systems, which securely suffocate rats underground. Following successful testing in Chicago, Boston, and Columbus Park, Manhattan, both methods were authorized for use. They demonstrated quicker results and fewer environmental hazards than poisons. The use of rat killers, or smart bait stations, such as the Italian-designed Ecomila system that uses food-based attractants instead of pesticides, was another significant advance. The apparatus automatically puts a rat to death in a non-toxic liquid after it has entered, and it digitally logs every capture. Technicians were able to keep an eye on trap activity in real time thanks to these stations, which were piloted in Bedford-Stuyvesant and East Harlem, and connected to a live dashboard run by the Office of Technology and Innovation. According to field data collected in late 2023, Ecomila units maintained higher catch rates than traditional traps, while reducing manual servicing time by 30%. Rat sighting complaints in RMZs decreased by 55% in the first year, according to the Office of Rodent Mitigation's 2024 status report. Grand Concourse had a decline from 2,800 to 1,300 complaints, while East Harlem saw a decline from roughly 3,200 to 1,400. The city credited containerization, more cleaning, and real-time data recording for these improvements. In those same neighborhoods, there was an increase of more than 40% in adherence to waste regulations. The city's ambition was mirrored in its investment. $3.5 million were set out in the FY 2023 budget for rat mitigation, and an additional $1.7 million were set aside for manpower and new technology. Additionally, under Speaker Adrienne Adams, the City Council passed legislation mandating that agencies exchange data about infestations. By putting a stop to decades of fragmented reporting through standardized digital systems, 20 full-time rat mitigation specialists with AI-connected monitoring tools and portable sensors were employed to keep an eye on the zones. The RMZ's emphasis on science and infrastructure attracted both domestic and foreign interest. The data-driven strategy was hailed by experts such as Jason Munchie South of Fordham University as the first time New York treated rat control as urban engineering, not extermination. Kaylee Byers of the Urban Rat Project at the University of British Columbia observed that the city's actions shifted the paradigm from poison to prevention. Based on the first results, further RMZs were established in Washington Heights, Bushwick, and Flushing by the end of 2024, extending the pilot network. Despite the advancements, Karate and other officials recognized that infrastructure was necessary for long-term control. Beyond annihilation, the city's 12,000 tons of residential trash per day continued to be a major problem, particularly in areas without bin storage capacity. However, the RMZs offered insightful information about which combinations of public behavior, policy, and technology resulted in the most quantifiable change. New York distinguished itself from previous War on Rats initiatives that depended on mass poisoning or temporary cleanup drives with its iterative, data-based refinement process. A small but significant milestone was reached by the end of 2023, when the city saw its first 14% citywide drop in rat sightings since 2018. Community involvement and oversight of public health. The battle against rats in New York City has developed into one of the world's most advanced urban environmental and public health initiatives. Rat management has evolved from a centuries-old battle with infestations to a data-driven, community-centered approach that views it as an issue of ecology, infrastructure, and shared responsibility rather than ruthless eradication. The city's realization that rat numbers are a reflection of more complex urban problems, such as waste management, housing quality, and environmental design, rather than just a demand for additional poison or traps, is essential to this change. The Department of Health and Mental Hygiene is at the center of the city's contemporary strategy, closely collaborating with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to keep an eye on environmental and human health. The bacterial disease leptospirosis, which is spread by rat urine, is monitored by their joint surveillance system. With the majority centered in the Bronx and Upper Manhattan, New York registered 24 cases by 2023, the highest annual total ever. Despite being uncommon, these illnesses indicated the need for more thorough preventative measures. To check for contamination, health officials gathered more than 2,000 swab and water samples from parks, garbage sites, and sewers between 2021 and 2023. These samples assisted in the creation of predictive risk maps. When paired with 311 complaint, data obtained via the city's rat information portal. By connecting hospitals, pest management companies, and municipal labs, this early warning network makes sure that any verified case prompts prompt sanitation and inspection sweeps in the neighborhood. The city's new attitude is centered on prevention rather than extermination. This change is exemplified by the Community Rat Academy, which was established in 2017. Property owners, building superintendents, and inhabitants are trained on structural and environmental rat avoidance, entry point sealing, nesting zone elimination, and proper waste management as part of the free program. By 2023, more than 5,000. The participants were certified community monitors after graduating. By conducting property inspections, recording hazards, and liaising with local authorities, these volunteers serve as neighborhood watchdogs. Their fieldwork makes neighborhoods the first line of defense, supplementing municipal inspections. Many neighborhood monitors now work directly with housing and sanitation officials, and the city offers checklists and access to inspection tools. This education-first approach has promoted long-term behavioral and infrastructure change while gradually lowering reliance on rodenticides and exterminators. This foundation has been strengthened by grassroots involvement. In underprivileged neighborhoods, neighborhood organizations like We Love Bed-Stuy, East Harlem 360, and the Bronx Community Cleanup Coalition host trash drives, block cleanups, and borough mitigation activities, where rats flourish. By the end of 2023, the city's Adopt a Basket initiative, which enables citizens to jointly maintain sealed trash cans, had expanded to over 1,200 bins. These collaborations have contributed to the transformation of urban sanitation from a government-exclusive function to a collaborative civic endeavor. As locals learn to recognize structural hazards and keep their neighborhoods clean in between city inspections, public involvement has been essential in lowering infestation rates. These ideas have been expanded by the Department of Parks and Recreation to include green spaces, which have historically been among the most challenging places to maintain. More than 100 active rat tunnels were found during a GPS mapping assessment carried out by the Central Park Conservancy in 2023. These holes were subsequently excavated by soil compaction and plant cutting. In a single year, volunteers gathered around 50 tons of rubbish from Prospect Park in Brooklyn. Parks in the Bronx and Queens, including Van Cortlandt Park and Flushing Meadows Corona Park, installed compacted earth methods to seal up burrows and stainless steel mesh barriers around trash cans. The city's larger integrated pest management plan, which places a high priority on sustainability and environmental design, is reflected in these ecological initiatives. In addition, residents and gardeners are urged to use non-lethal deterrents for poison, such as peppermint oil or ultrasonic devices. The high-tech rat mitigation plan implemented in New York City has been as successful as releasing rat killers in large quantities. The city, supported by $3.5 million in funding, employs smart waste bins, AI cameras, and contraceptive baits in place of poisons and predators. Between 2022 and 2024, proactive inspections increased by 65%, which resulted in a 14% decrease in rat complaints overall and up to 55% decreases in critical mitigation zones. Countless. In order to achieve true population control by data, engineering, and coordinated sanitation rather than brutal eradication, this system is supplemented by compassionate trapping and killing devices. Thank you for watching, and that's it for now. Was this video enjoyable to you? To ensure that you don't miss any of our next uploads, if you did, please think about liking, commenting, and clicking the subscribe button. Additionally, don't miss this very amazing video that is currently on your screen.